right, I think we can start now. Welcome everyone. So happy to continue the roundtable sessions, which we do each and every month. At least we try to keep that up. And this topic was proposed by one of our developer community members, and we are happy to organize this for you. Hope that it will be helpful and informative. And we have Alex Woodhead today to present, and Evgeny Shvarov as well. And we'll have 2 short demos. Will be open for Q&A. And at the end of the meeting, we will have open discussions as usual. So yeah, Alex, please go ahead.
Yeah. Also, before Alex will start it, so we call it InterSystems Technology Roundtable for developers, how to improve your dev practices, how to openly share. So actually, we encourage you for the open conversation. Maybe you have some like a shortcuts and like daily developer life, what helps you to like be more productive, and also on contrary, what like bothers you every day, what is really annoying, please share. So maybe people in the round table, they have some solutions already for that, and so we yeah.
Oh, and we have Team Leavitt presenting today as well. Yeah, sorry for that, team. This is my collapse in my head.
Time, me too. Yes. So I have a very short, maybe snippet. Yeah. So okay, Alex. Yeah. Alex, are you with us? Yeah.
Yes, I am. Yes, I sort of switch from the camera to share the screen. So today, I'd like to sort of think about how developers work with support. So we create solutions, and this is sort of aimed at integration and trying to look for opportunities to have more effective. So this could be handover, this could be operational support, and potentially there may be some community opportunities here where we are creating the same things over and over again, and maybe part of that could be done in a community way. So if I just talk you through the scenarios. So when we work as developers, we might have a perspective if we've only sort of created code. Some people may only work on a database with SQL or write web applications or integration. I think with Iris, developers get a broad range of sort of experience in all of these areas. You may or may not have a support team experience. You may or may not have worked in infrastructure. So I'm not sure how common it is to have all 3 areas of experience. And that sort of gives you a certain perspective about how much you expect to contribute when it comes to integrations. Also, to acknowledge that as developers, you have project pressures where change, it's dictated by commercial business requests. You might be assigned bugs to fix, enhancements, create a new interface. You may have a rigid development workflow where you build, test, deploy, you hand it over, and you're done. You're sort of looking to the next task, and hopefully you can make time to document. I think it's ideal if you have living documents of interfaces, so they're not what you thought you would create with addendums. You have a document which states the current as a reference for where the deployed software is today. In a support role, have a totally different range of activities. So you're not responding to tasks. You can be reacting to crisis, fighting fires. You have a service-driven perspective. You're trying to keep things going. You're trying to control what is changing on the system. You coordinate between different vendors, downtime to do patching. You would be working on with protocols to backup, restore failovers, responsible for system health, infrastructure health. You look at problems in a totally different way. So where you may develop software within an iris integration, you may be unaware of when problems occur, if it's a switch, if it is some storage appliance that's causing a problem. It'd be outside of what you deploy as a developer, but a support scope is having to cover all of that. What really sort of look at here is support is a workaround factory. So even where there are limitations with developments that you make and deploy, support are very adept to figuring out how they can just get it to work as they want it to work that day, and may be outside how that software is intended to run. So I present support as yet another customer to developers, and where a developer might create set messages that are tested for transformations and delivery, support will get involved with the end applications that those messages are delivered to, and they're much more in tune with what the information is actually passing through messages, and questions that they may be following up when they look at an integration could be, when did a message for a patient get delivered? Which interfaces have received a message with a particular identifier suffix? What was a source of information for a particular record in an external system? How was that layered in? So occasionally you might find that there's an address, but it contains both old and new information. And how exactly did it happen? What was the layering of messages that occurred for that to happen? And sometimes you get corruption occurs in a similar way. I see on the community requests or thoughts about support dashboards. How do we develop a dashboard? And that's more looking at the reporting side. I think those are more sponsored developments, looking at here, I've put urgent test raised that haven't been booked in on an external system in 3 hours. Perhaps that's something that the integration engine has visibility of that information and could help out. So support are going to look at an integration as services, businesses, processes and operations in one or more namespaces, and they have different profiles. So some of these messages are a bit convoluted in the processing, some are almost a pass-through, others are synchronous, so doing a master patient index search. If we look at the built-in tools and integration, are very much focused on, I suppose, how the developer is building components. There's a message viewer that you can search for content in. There's a separate trace. There's a separate event log. Developers can provide, there's a sort of hook in services and operations for search tables, custom search tables, where you can index. Sometimes you have quite complex messages, and you can build an index of specific pieces of information which would be difficult to search for otherwise. So what I've done in the past with customers is to sort of have a look with support at their understanding of SQL tables. And I was surprised at, because they're in many cases are managing quite complex applications as well as the integration engine, there'll be quite a few people in a support team that are very adept at writing ad hoc SQL to track down a problem. So educating them about several of the tables within the integration engine can really add some sort of rockets to their progress in tracking down a problem, because they don't just have to look at the message viewer. They're not searching, finding a session ID, then looking in the event log for the session ID. They can do that all just with SQL. And if I bring up an example here, so this was a FTP service, and there was a problem that occurred after this interface was live for a while. And it put some error handling in, and so it was tracking some information about a particular error of some expected value. And the question was, well, these files are all coming from different sites from the FTP interface. Which site is it? Is that a particular type of patient that these sort of records are coming in? And without writing any new instrumentation or having to log into the system and explain and help them investigate, there was one key thing here, that using the stream container, it has this sort of automatic property for the original file name. And with the support being able to see how to the different table names, and they can join by session ID, they can link the particular error that was occurring and also list the file name, and it's a lot quicker. And these will be like snippets for the next time they'll have a reference for SQL snippets they want to run. Another example is with rules. Where did this particular session get delivered to? So you can see there's a return value. So you can write a composite SQL statement that pulls event logs and maybe part of a message, data content, and to sort of track down in sort of business logic of what's going wrong with the information that's in flight. So my challenge here is for the developer to speak to the support and get an understanding of how they're using integration day to day. It can be quite surprising sometimes to see support will just restart the whole production when that wasn't necessary, but it did solve the problem. And is there a less sort of sledgehammer way to rectify the issue that may not have other sort of collateral impact at the end of the month for a report that might have an issue because of the whole production restart? And possibly there's interfaces that are being reused. So a web service that's now being consumed by 2 or 3 other clients that you didn't know about when you originally wrote the interface, and then you get new errors happening. So maybe every month, every 2 months, you get an idea of how the use of the system is being evolved, how the support of finding, operating the integration, and it might sort of create some new opportunities. So things that I've done in the past for customers were this sort of chat view, or I call it conversation view years ago, where when messages flow through the integration engine, we have this session ID, and that you can trace what happens within a namespace for that message, may be delivered to several endpoints. But conversations of data, a sort of business level logic of information is occurring over many interleaved messages. And so sometimes support is trying to understand where a conversation has been dropped, where it's taking too long. So by providing a view across sessions, perhaps for a particular episode, it allows support to appreciate straight away that a certain workflow, a logical workflow, has been completed. It may be that on a downstream system, when they've added a new order item or a new department, they also need to add some kind of trigger that's going to send a message back into the integration, and that's not happened. So this is useful as you might have a departmental rollout, or as new configuration is added to a downstream system. Having a conversation view might help detect sort of where that's breaking for certain episodes. Then another common pattern is count in and count back, where I suppose this is like tests. A test is raised to say for an X-ray, and you want to know, well, did we ever get to a report? Was that ever finalized on the downstream system? And how many outstanding? How long does it normally take? Is that active? Because that may, the integration sits in the middle of a lot of systems. And so the finger is, well, perhaps there's something wrong right in the integration. But if you have these views, they can help support look and phone the support for the downstream system and rectify the real problem quicker. Also, you may have classifications that you might need, which may be across several messages. So the idea is that the integration engine has all of this data available. It can help the day-to-day of delivering messages and keeping that integrity of messages, and it could help do the job better. So lastly, some feedback, and if I give a hint here, if you were to create a community project that provided these views and hooks where you could store data into it, support may use in a disaster recovery scenario. Some namespaces may be volatile, so they won't be restored immediately in a disaster recovery. So you may want to map reporting data into a namespace that is. But I'm really interested and sort of fascinated to learn new sort of requirements that you might have between development and support in your organizations. Okay, back to the team.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, we're open to questions or any discussions around this.
Yeah, thank you, Alex, for sharing this. And I hope you will share the slide deck also. Maybe we could follow up with that. Yeah, I think that it can be really helpful to have the to have the option to mirror what is going on with your interoperability solution to SQL and be able to join. So, I'm not very experienced with the interoperability yet, but I already I've been trying to build something, like first something working, and then I already found that this it's really helpful to have the SQL access to interoperability components. What do people think? What do you think, guys, who are on the call? Do you use SQL while building interoperability? I mean, to deal with the session with the context of interoperability. And yeah.
Yeah, hi, Evgeny. Yeah, I have done this once in my lab project. So when we are getting the interoperability, when we are getting the results from analyzers, then I'm using the select statement to get the results and the reference range, and then we are updating accordingly.
Yeah, thanks, Muhammad. Yeah, colleagues, please share your experience. Any questions to Alex? Alex, thanks a lot again for bringing this. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear
You
me?
can also.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Yes. Hello.
Hey.
We use interoperability for a long time, and we use SQL to find some information that was processed by Iris. And the main issue here is to find the information that is inside of the message. So our problems is to get what was the execution that has the like a patient 1, 2, 3 or John. So sometimes we have more than 1.5 million messages per day. So it takes long time, even looking the message header and the class of the message that we have persistent. Okay. And another thing is some messages are so huge that when we want to see the message in the portal, our operation support has problem. It takes so many time to see the content of the message in the portal when you click content, or do you know?
Yes, thank you for this experience. So I wonder if it, yeah, with 1 billion messages per day, it's huge.
It's
I think.
1.5 million.
I mean,
Not
million.
billion.
Million
Million
is also big.
1.5 million.
1.5 million per day. Yes, so it's
Per day. Yes.
really intense
from many, we have more than 400 services, and the message we have a very tiny message, but we have a huge message, like 1 million records that we have to get the information from one system and send to SAP or came back from ECP.
You mean in about 1 million records in one message even?
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's intense. So and
yes, it was broke because it's like a not billings, contable. I don't know the name. For fiscal records, we have like the monthly information. So we have we asked the guys from the source system to broke the message in 1 million records. So we have more than one.
yeah, so I hope you work with support, but I also wrote down your feedback on that. Indeed, maybe the huge messages are difficult to observe.
Okay.
Yeah.
And about the sorry to take so long time. About the time to see the information, to send the files that was processed in and out in the from some systems. And what we did, we create we customize the portal, the Iris portal, to have a link like export XML.
Mm-hmm.
We have this in Ensemble 2012, and after that we don't have anymore. So we just click right click and export to or save yes, and we can export and create the file that our support has to send by email, for example. And we don't need to see the file, the XML in the browser. That we know that the browser takes a long time to parse it.
Yeah, makes sense.
To show beauty, and we want to be fast.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Great insights, Luis. Thank you. I bet you have a lot of having such experience, or maybe you have a lot of grams of experience. I mean, something that you could share maybe next time if you could package something like what? Okay, guys, this is our experience. If you could something that you could helpful that you could share with other developers, that would be really great. So if you're willing to do that, that would be fantastic. Yeah.
I'm able to.
I had sort of one question back, which was, do you use custom search tables? So there's the feature in integration where, especially you'll see this for the old HL7 version 2, where messages that come in, you can assign in the settings for the service or operation a particular type of search table. By default, they don't do much, but you can extend those. And the idea is that you have a sort of X data block and you apply these expressions. And when you save and compile a code, it will generate code that actually goes and retrieves the data. And you can customize those. And the nice thing about that approach is it's all tied in with the purge. So when you lose information from old messages that you don't need anymore, it should also delete the indexes which are not needed. Your point about the message being too large, that sounds like maybe there's a need for some kind of paging where maybe 300 lines of XML, that's enough, and then you just want to step through, and it would be quicker to view parts of a document rather than all of it. Do you need to collapse the XML, or can you just view it in sections?
So we don't use search tables yet.
Okay.
And about the XML, we operate the portal, taking care to don't click on content tab, because we know that place is dangerous to when we have a large message. So our support expected to take the file and export and send by email. Okay. Just
Okay.
that.
So as a sort of requirement that you're looking for, it's some kind of threshold. If a message gets beyond a certain size, you don't want that message viewer to actually attempt to display. You just download anyway. That sounds like would speed things up for yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So I would propose to move to the next presentation then, and we always can continue discussing after all the presentations are done, like any questions you might have. And I also encouraging you to use chat. If you, for some reason, not ready to speak out, we are monitoring all the questions there as well. Tim, may I invite you to be a speaker to present next?
Absolutely. So we're going to shift gears a little bit. Just to introduce myself for those I haven't met before, I'm the development manager in application services at InterSystems. So I manage a team of 9 developers, and for the summer, 9 additional interns who are working on a total of about 15 different internal applications, all built on Iris. So a whole lot of variety, a whole lot of different application and architectures there. And I'd like to think that my team has a unique perspective being within InterSystems, working on such a wide variety of things for just best practices for full stack application development on Iris. And really my whole team, we're all full stack developers. So we're all doing everything from the database to a variety of different UI technologies, a little bit concerned with operations as well. So when I think about optimizing dev practices, what I think about is automating and reducing the amount of time spent on the boring things or the time-consuming things. And what I'd like to share today is some of the tools and techniques that I've come up with and that my team has adopted, and other people within InterSystems have been adopting as well, in the context of full stack application development to just be able to build modern web applications more rapidly. When I say rapid application development, it makes me think back to when I started at InterSystems as an intern 14 years ago. And at that point, we were building applications using Zen. And I thought it was really cool then. I think I've come around to see it's not really the best way to build applications now. But I've found that we've kind of been chasing that same, like, how do we do actual rapid application development with more modern user interface technology and with REST APIs. So that leads to my demo, which is just kind of an example of how we're doing that right now. All right, so we'll show this window. So what we're going to look at is, can you see my screen? Is that?
Yep.
Yes.
Right, great. So what we'll be looking at is the Angular Tour of Heroes tutorial application with an Iris backend as a use case for a couple different Open Exchange packages. ISC REST, ISC IPM JS are the main two. ISC REST allows you to build REST APIs rapidly and securely. ISC IPM JS supports deployment of web applications through the package manager, and we'll have cameos from the Git source control extension and the package manager itself, of course. So just to talk a little bit about structure here. So I have a Git repo that has a whole modern full stack application in it. If I look at my package description, I can see I've got a package classes. I have an Angular application that's under /ng/tour, and that's just my whole Angular application, nothing at all Iris specific in there. And then a couple extra things to wire in to say, once we've built this, we'll move it over to a web application. We have another web application.
We're only
Yes.
seeing your browser. We're not seeing maybe your
no.
shared app rather than screen.
Thank you.
Yeah, we always saw your tour,
Yep.
tour of the heroes page here.
There we go. How about now?
Yeah, we see VS Code.
Yep. Okay. Sorry about that. So backing up, this is our a full stack application, single Git repo. Our package definition says we've got some classes. We have an Angular application, so that's under /ng/tor in this case, and that's just typical Angular application structure. When this is built, it goes to this directory, which we move over to a web application. And we have another web application that serves up the API. And then there's some additional stuff in here around Open API that I'll get to in a minute. So I can just say, through all of this automation and through ISC IPM.js, I can just say load this application route, and it'll compile my classes, it'll build the Angular UI, it'll deploy it to the correct web application, and that'll take a minute. So this is the result. I have my web application CSP user Tor, and there's a fancy dispatch class that supports Angular's path location strategy. So the URLs are pretty. It's not like index.html hashtag something or other for the path. And this is set up with the most of a real Iris REST API in backend. So this data is actually in here. I can update it. It updates in the database. I can create a new hero, where a hero at this point is just a name. That's kind of the state of the tutorial as a starting point. One thing that I don't have quite working yet is the search. So this is just kind of wired up incorrectly at this point. So we'll use that as a use case for how ISC REST can accelerate full stack application development. So right now, when you install a package through the package manager in development mode, you get a studio project for it for free. So I can just see I've got a ridiculous number of projects in here, and I can just say I want to edit code in this project, and that allows me to edit server side through ISFS. So I'm going to override, well, here I have my hero class. It extends %persistent. It's got one property, a name, and then it has some other things in here that make it easily exposed over REST. So we extend from ISC REST %pkg.isc.rest.model.adapter. That says this is a persistent class that we just want to make available for CRUD operations and queries over REST. I want to include the IDs in the representation. So I've got a couple class parameters that control the JSON projection of this class, overridden to say we want to include the ID, and we'll name that field in the object ID. There's also a check permission method that should never be overridden as is here, but I have just for simplicity, where you would check to see, given what the user is trying to do with this, are they actually allowed? The default implementation is they're not allowed to do anything in ISC REST. You have to override this and say what they are allowed to do. The other really neat thing that we can do, well, so backing up, I want to add a feature to search by name. So I can imagine adding a class query in here. Search by name, we'll give it name as %string, as %SQL query. And this is just going to be select ID from pkg ISC samples or heroes.hero, where name contains name. And that's my class query. So what do I do to make this available over REST and have a REST call that calls this class query that returns the proper JSON representation of objects of this class? In ISC REST, the way I would do that is I'd just go and I'd override this X data block. We'll add actions. We'll add an action. We'll name it search. It'll be a get, and we're going to call the search by name class query. And we'll add an argument here because the query has an argument. The name will be, from a REST standpoint, will be, well, I'll just call it name. It's required. the source could be a number of possible places, but in this case, it's just going to be a URL parameter. So the source is query, and the target is the name parameter in the class query. So that's it. I've made this class query available to REST access, and it returns IDs, so we'll get instances of this class based on that ID. Through the package manager, I can run the generate lifecycle phase of my package. I can look at just what's staged right now and I can see I've got my changes to this class. I've regenerated by running this, I've regenerated the OpenAPI spec for my API, so I can see I have /hero/$search and a description of what the request format is. Once this finishes up, I can see I've also had some Angular code automatically generated for me to support calling that endpoint. And now I can just hop over to my Angular UI. And I've got an Angular service that does the search. I've got an incorrect implementation of the search method here now, but now I can say hero search get, name is the term. I'll save that. I'll reload my package to rebuild the Angular UI and deploy it in the web application, which is reasonably fast, but is going to take just a second. Waiting. All right. So now if I refresh this and let's see if it just works. There we go. I can do my search. This is using the new REST endpoint I've created and integrating this Angular UI with a very well-defined REST API in the Iris backend is that easy. This is something that we've been using for a number of applications on my team that has really accelerated the way that we do modern web application development. And that's about the quickest demo I can do of it. There are a lot more features in there too. Any questions?
Yes, Sharik, please go ahead. Sharik, do you have questions? So yeah.
No, not a question. Sorry.
Yeah, I thought you raised the hand.
Tim, I have a question. It's John here.
Yeah.
Have you been making use of snippets inside VS Code for that kind of filling out effectively boilerplate structures? It seemed like you would. I mean, we're getting code help going on because of the schema, but you were still typing stuff which perhaps you would be doing several times over if you're putting lots of get type of REST methods in there.
Yeah, I haven't actually used snippets. I take it from your comment that I probably should be.
Oh, I mean, it's just one of the richness. One of the nice things about VS Code is that there is such a lot of richness there, and as long as people, I'm kind of content as long as people know it's there and decide actually it doesn't buy me anything, but it can be a bit sad when you see people do things you think actually there's a really quicker way of doing that. So it's all part of this kind of spreading the experience, and demos are a great way of seeing you know, what can be done and getting new ideas.
Yeah. So with snippets, is there like kind of a templating syntax where you can say I want to so like in my use case, what I want to do, we can just look at the diff here. Want to throw in like the repeated things would be there's a class query name that appears in both of these places. There's an argument name that appears in a couple places. And I want to add a class query in here and also have it added in here. Is there that kind of templating to be able to do something that advanced in snippets or?
Yeah, snippets can have the ability to say that as you're inserting a snippet, it can prompt you for the sort of insert points, and what you type in an insert point can then appear in several other places within the boilerplate code that the snippet brought in. So it's pretty sophisticated. It's not, you know, there are limits, but and the syntax for writing them is a bit opaque because you have to effectively write them in JSON. I'd say it's worth exploring, because if you find yourself typing the same stuff in several times over, just changing a value in a couple of places, then a snippet is a great way of saying you just call up the whole lot of code and fill in the blanks in one go.
Yeah, I've given myself a task to look at that, and I'd imagine you can also make a library of those available for other people who are using the same tools, so that.
Yeah, exactly, and techniques for being able to share snippets around was one of the things that I was investigating in the most recent contest, to allow snippets to be bundled actually as IPM packages.
Cool. So I know exactly what to type here because I wrote this, but if I just hand it off to someone on my team, they're going to be, digging around in documentation, scratching their head, that kind of thing. Someone new using it. So that's a really helpful point. Thank you.
Right, you're welcome. Thanks.
Yeah, John, do you want to maybe share next time a quick demo how snippets are powerful? What are your techniques using sophisticated snippets? How you save time and yeah.
I guess the main power, I think the main power of snippets is when you are doing similar kind of stuff repeatedly, and quite often the coding work that I'm doing is not similar stuff repeatedly. It's different every time stuff, and so snippets are of less benefit there. But I think, seeing what Tim was doing there and knowing that it's to do with a framework with a REST element and an Angular element, and needing to keep things coordinated, that it seemed like it would be a good thing. So I'd say let's see what Tim makes of snippets, and then he can do another session.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, anyway, for those who are on the call, I encourage you maybe to approach John if you have if you don't use the snippets yet. So John, let me took the initiative to invite everyone to refer to you. Yes, maybe you could help to set up some snippets for some regular annoying and cycles. Yes, that could be converted to snippets. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. And Tim, if anyone has any questions to Tim, because I have, so if not, I will go. Yeah. So while you're thinking, Tim, I'm curious. So you showed that there is a XML map with actions.
Yeah.
And this is the substitution of REST IP map that we usually do when we set up when we create a REST API application. We derive from %rest, right? Yes, and then we build this map.
Yeah.
Of course. So you mean that it is something that automatically being created in just by this thing, yeah? So right. So
yeah. So just to back up and explain ISC REST a little bit more, what we have is there is a single REST dispatch class that's defined that has one URL map that says, for every, let me just pull it up and I can show you. So basically, in our resource class, we define a resource name. In our REST handler, we reference that resource name. So /hero will end up referring to this resource. And there's there's some additional logic in there to say, I have an application-specific REST handler that extends this, and these are the different resource class names that are actually allowed through this, so that you could, say, reuse REST resources across different applications, or have multiple applications running in the same namespace that don't step on each other's toes. But within this, there are, underneath the resource name, there is, if you have something that starts with a $, like our $search action, as we saw in the OpenAPI, that ends up referring to something from this X data block. The important thing here is when we have this URL map in a %csp.rest subclass, that tells us what the routes are, but it doesn't provide the information about the actual format of the requests and responses that we would need, or the URL parameters that we would need to drive OpenAPI documentation. So in the spec first approach, you define your OpenAPI spec, which is log, and then you have it generate some stub REST endpoints where you need to fill in all the implementation details for each one. With this approach, you define a persistent class and then extend adapter, and we know what the shape of that class is because of its properties. And we can use different JSON mappings to provide granular security over properties to say, exclude this from JSON import export, define multiple mappings for the same class. There's a way that you could have multiple REST resources defined that handle different representations of the same data. And that's how you get your more granular security to avoid, mass assignment and excessive data exposure vulnerabilities. And the important thing is we have enough information between the structure of this object and the structure defined in the action map to say, this is exactly what it's going to look like from a REST perspective. So we can generate the OpenAPI and can generate other things based on the OpenAPI. So as a developer, you're really just working with your object script classes and your client code and not having to worry about the middle layers and a whole lot of hand coding in there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, this is pretty impressive. It looks like it can save a lot of time for developers with REST API. So it's and maybe save a few space. Yeah, I mean that you don't need to introduce new classes like and if I understood it properly. So another quick question. So that embedded Python is getting more and more popular. If there is a room for embedded Python business logic for this approach with IC.
So you can, just like you can call a class query, you can also define a method or a class method in the class that you expose through the action map. So what I would imagine for an embedded Python use case is having an object script method that has, well-defined. It's interesting.
Yeah, for example, just
probably you'd have an object script method that has your object script input and return types that are just registered objects, say. And if you have a JSON enabled registered object as an argument to a method, you can say, grab that in the action, you can say, grab that from the request body, and it'll automatically serialize it. And because of the type of the JSON enabled object, it knows the structure of it. Same for the return type. So that's how we'd inform OpenAPI generation there. If you then wanted to call into some embedded Python code, you would just do that from within that method and, marshal things appropriately into the right sorts of objects for that.
Very cool. So honestly, I never tried yet. I see REST by myself, but I think this is something that a lot of the community, like developers in community, could benefit greatly. And as I can understand, Team's team already benefits with this approach. So yes.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like the best way for me to evangelize my open source projects is to get you excited about them, Evgeny. Or forget source control. Maybe it'll work for this too.
I'm not the only hero in developer community.
I know.
Happily, we have a lot of them. So, and yes, but thank you, and I want to be encouraged. So yeah, I'm interested. So yeah. And another.
If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me via developer community or GitHub discussions on ISC REST or other projects as appropriate.
Yeah, yes, sure. Another quick question regarding it is it only for Angular or is any backend, any front end is supported?
So there are some things that end up being Angular specific. ISC IPM.js also has built-in support for React, although I haven't worked with it too much. And if you wanted to, it's fairly extensible if you wanted to define your own special handling for, I have a JavaScript framework that sticks build artifacts here and needs these arguments and npm run command to actually do the build. It's pretty abstracted, so if you want to see the code, it's just in here. So yeah, built-in support for Angular and React. If you're using something else, I don't know if anybody uses anything else other than the two, but I'm sure some people do. So you could repurpose straightforwardly enough, I think.
Okay, thanks a lot. Any more questions to Tim?
I had one, which was, do you have any thoughts on, so in this case, you've got an end-to-end, you've got a web application, and you've got an API. Could you use this just as the API? And if you did, what kind of support does it have built in for versions? So if you had 3 or 4 different versions of a client out there, does this provide any special support for versioning?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There are a couple ways you could do that. You could have so generally, if we're running out of time, is that what you're going to say, Evgeny?
Actually, I was going to come with help to use. I mean, just use IPM versions. So I was going to suggest so that you could deploy with you could use in Module XML IPM versions. So you could deploy with that. So I think this could be. I'm not sure. It's just guessing, but you can definitely use version in IPM version, and maybe it could be the thing.
I think the versioning issue with REST APIs is if one server has to service multiple clients, and the client wants to be able to use new features on a server that's got that capability, but if it wants old interfaces, it has to use those. So it's not just a case of getting the right version onto your server. It's about hosting multiple API versions to allow for client systems to migrate between them.
Yep. So the 2 ways to do that with ISC REST would be I mentioned you can have multiple representations of the same resource. So you could have the same underlying persistent class with a v1 isc.rest resource class and a v2 and a v3 and so on. And then you would have separate version REST APIs that extend, or REST dispatch classes that extend the base REST dispatch class and permit access to the appropriate version resources. And maybe those change, maybe they don't. Certainly there would be inheritance between them to support reuse of things that haven't changed and consistent labeling. The other thing that you could do, and there are other use cases for this as well, is have different media types. So you might have like application/vnd.intersystems.myproject.myresource.v1 plus JSON or something. kind of absurd like that. But in that case, your client can just ask for application/JSON if they want the latest, greatest, whatever it happens to be, or they can ask for a previous version based on the media type. And that will always be supported because we wouldn't change that from a compatibility perspective. So that's two different ways to solve the problem that would both work, I think, better in ISC REST than in just duplicating the dispatch class and overriding things, especially scaling out over a whole application.
Great, thanks for that considered response, and thanks, John, for redefining the problem more accurately than I had stated originally. Yeah, it was that single service that is having to talk to several different version clients. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tim, for sharing this. And we also we have some any more questions to Tim, as we maybe we could also wrap this session up. And we have some suggestion from Yuri that it'd be great to use Xdata or something else to to have a way to generate reports. Yes, so it's if I understood you properly, Yuri, say yeah. And if anyone on the call uses the report generation approach, I know that it was possible with Zen reports, right, Tim? So correct me if I'm wrong, yeah. But so a lot of members use that. So, but what is the best approach now? Oh, yeah, maybe it could be one of the interesting topics for the next roundtable. KK is asking if we recorded that. I'm not sure if we recorded that. Usually we don't.
We do.
We do.
We do. We just usually we making this available only for community members, and it will be published attached to announcement on developer community, and it will be published in Global Masters as well. So you will be able to watch this again. Anytime, just reach me out. I will be happy to provide you a link to it.
Perfect.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming and for all your questions. Thanks for amazing presentations to our speaker. Evgeny, I'm sorry, we will have to kind of postpone your demo for the next time. We will be announcing our next roundtable soon. Feel free to reach me out to suggest topics you would love to discuss, as we are creating the schedule till the end of the year. And if any questions, again, please publish them on developer community. We will make sure they will be answered. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Have a perfect day. Yeah.